That was a non-car stoplight attack.
Got it. Well, you never quite know what people are going to say to the camera on the pop ride. And here we are on the pop ride in Richardson / Plano / Allen / Parker / Murphy and what other cities we roll through on this ride. It was a super hot day, and I think the max temperatures today were over 100 in our area, but I don't think it got to 100 on the ride. But kind of also like a cold front came through during the middle of the ride. I think the wind switched from the south to the north, and it went down by 4 degrees. And it felt like it was overcast and a little bit cooler. When I say a little bit cooler, I mean low 90s Fahrenheit. But it was a good time on the ride. So I had a topic that I thought I wanted to discuss today, and it's a continuation of a topic that I started on the last video, the wattage ride video, the heavy hitter video, wattage video. So you can look that up if you'd like. But it's this notion of converting oneself from a B rider to an A rider, and who can do it, and how do you do it? This conversation, this thought was stimulated by my father, talking to my father. And my father was complaining, maybe complaining is not the right word, but he was basically saying that he was never able to make that leap from being a B rider to an A rider despite all his efforts. And we were debating whether this was due to some limitation of his physiology, his genetics, whatever, his health, or was it just the fact that he wasn't training correctly or otherwise doing the things that he needed to do to make that jump from a B rider to an A rider. So we should probably start with some definitions. What is an A rider? What is a B rider? An A rider, simply put, is someone who does the fastest group rides, i.e. the A-level group rides. A B rider is someone who does the B-level group rides, the next level down. There is nothing wrong with being a B rider. B riders are very fit. B riders are very fast. Sometimes B riders are just as fast as A riders. They just don't like A rides. But in general, the A riders are faster and fitter than the B riders. And there's whole, levels of rides below B level, like C level, or, there's actually rides that in our local area, we have enough people that there's an A, B, C, and D groups, with A being the fastest and, of course, D being the slowest. And, you have these group rides around here that average something like 12 miles an hour, sort of beginner level type group rides. And those are wonderful to have. They are necessary to really support a robust scene of getting people started from essentially little to no fitness, little experience in group rides, and getting them on their way. But we're talking here not about someone going from the couch to an A rider, but someone going from the B ride to the A ride. Now, there are many ways to accomplish this. In fact, there have been, essentially every A rider was probably at one point a B rider. They didn't just roll out of bed and they were an A rider. I suppose it's possible the first time someone hopped on a group ride, it does happen that they're fit enough to be an A rider, but probably they don't have the bike skills or the group ride etiquette / safety to make it appropriate for them to be an A rider. They really need to start at a lower level, which is usually a safer level. And I say usually, I mean it's not always actually safer. The A riders in general are better bike handlers, and they know how to manage space better than the less experienced lower level riders, in my opinion. So, but A riders also tend to take a few more risks, in my experience. So, getting back to this topic exactly of how one makes this conversion. My theory, my philosophy, my thought is that essentially anybody can go from being a B rider to an A rider. there is almost nobody that has physical limitations that would prevent them from doing so. So, of course, age may play a role. If you're sitting here watching this and you're 80 years old, maybe you can't. Maybe you're 70, maybe you can't. Um, Maybe you're 10 years old, maybe you can't. So, age may play a role. Um, what else? But otherwise, maybe you have some terrible illness, and your ability to process oxygen, your VO2 max is terrible. Your genetics are super terrible, like the bottom 1% of the human population. Okay, maybe. But in general, people will have a profile. Like, in other words, the same philosophy would say that anybody can become a good runner. It just depends on what kind of running we're talking about. You might not be a great sprinter, you might not be great at the 100-meter dash, but maybe you could be a very good sort of 2-mile person, or a good marathon, or ultra distance. You've got some ideal kind of distance and power exertion and muscle fiber types that you can leverage to be the best rider that you can be. So you might be a sprinter, you might be somebody who's not quite a sprinter, but one level down. The guy who can often stay on and be the fastest in the breakaway. You might be a breakaway specialist. You might be somebody who's good at like time trialing, where you don't really get up to the high watts, but you're good at just holding a lower level of wattage that other people can't match because they can't stay as long at that level, the quote-unquote diesel engine. There's something in there that you can be, and and all those people can exist together on a group ride, on a group ride. So, if you are in the situation that you are going on the A ride and you are constantly getting dropped from the A ride, and this happens over and over every time, and it's not only happening over and over this year, it's happened over and over for a longer period than that, like years and years, you've got an issue. You're not doing it right. You need to change how you're doing it. Um, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and finding that you're not improving and expect to suddenly improve. The basic thing that gets you faster is stressing your body, recovering from that stress, and then experiencing adaptation. So that's where, you haven't been to the gym, you haven't lifted weights in a long time. The first time you go to that gym, it's going to be stress on those muscles. You feel super sore. It hurts. It's about 2 days later, it really hurts. And you keep lifting, and the same kind of lifting that really hurt you the first time stops hurting you because you've experienced adaptation. And you're giving yourself time and rest between the times that you stress your muscles. Well, the same thing occurs in cycling. If you are doing the same thing over and over, you are not probably giving yourself enough stress. So how does one increase stress? Well, pretty simply, you ride more and you ride harder, and the gist of that, the exact recipe for that, well, there's a million different recipes for that, and there's a lot of different philosophies about how one can achieve that. So I kind of think of two main things that need to be worked on to stay on a group ride. One is the low end, one is the top end. You need both. You need to deal with the surges with the top end, and you just need to have that basic fitness on the low end. So, this is a golden time to get better in cycling. It's never been easier to get better. When I say that, we have more knowledge, we have more techniques, we have smart trainers, we have relatively cheap training plans out there. You don't need to have an expensive coach. You don't have to plow through a book. You don't even necessarily need a power meter, although it would be super helpful, because that is the one thing that actually can gauge your improvement. Um, it is a measurable thing how much power you can produce. So I know people that spend thousands and thousands of dollars on this and that part of cycling, and then they don't spend the money to buy a power meter, and then they complain about how they're never improving. Well, you're not measuring anything you're doing, so how are you going to improve? Now, you don't need to have a power meter to improve. Cyclists for 100 years were improving without power meters. So I'm trying to figure out when the bicycle was invented and when the power meter was invented. But anyway, people can improve. You don't need a power meter to improve your running. Uh, People can improve through working out and having knowledge about that. You can improve using, heart rate monitors is another tool that can be used that's a lot cheaper than power meters, but power meters are certainly cheaper. Um, when I was first on the bike, so I bought my first road bike for myself as an adult in about 2002. And people talked about, like these going on, you needed base miles to really get better. And then people kind of got away from that, I think, a little bit, the training philosophy. But I think there is actually a lot of truth to this base mile thing. Your body adapts over time. You need to put in the time on the bike. And it can't just be tooling around. It can't be going super slow and easy. It's got to be going at some pace that works you. But you do need a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of miles. So what I'm referring to a little bit here is something called the polarized approach to training, which is the idea that you go fairly easy but do that a lot. So that'd be kind of like your base miles. And then you also go really hard but a much smaller portion of the time, and it's not just a little bit hard but really hard. That's going to create the adaptation. Well, they both create adaptations, but different kinds of adaptations. If you spend all your time in the middle, in other words, not going really hard but not going easy, that can wear you out without creating adaptation as efficiently. So what we're talking about there is sort of more your sweet spot kind of cycling, where if you're not familiar with power in terms like functional threshold power, etc., it'll be a little bit confusing to you, but this would be, going like at 85% of your FTP, your functional threshold power. It's actually potentially a good way to train, and a lot of people do that kind of training, and there are many coaches that have great success with athletes doing sweet spot type training. But I think there's really a lot to be said for the polarized kind of training. So how does this get back to the B-level cyclist getting to the A level? Well, are you doing enough time in the saddle? So let's say that you average 6 hours per week. What if you could up that to 8 hours per week and not really put yourself in the hurt locker doing so, but you just add on 2 hours of relatively easy cycling time, which is just going to create this muscular endurance with your body. So that's something I've really tried to do this year, to spend more time on the bike, but it's easy time. It's not hard time. It's easy enough that I can be on the trainer and I can watch a TV show and pay attention to it. If I'm going hard on the trainer, I cannot pay attention to the TV. The most I can do is listen to music. I cannot follow anything. I can't even watch sports when I'm really working hard on the trainer. So, like for example, I might be watching auto racing, and I'm going at 150 watts, 175 watts, maybe 200 watts. My threshold power is closer to 300 watts, so going 150, 175 watts is not terribly taxing for me. If your threshold power is like 200, then maybe you need to be going like 110 or something like that. And you're just adding on a little bit more time. You also need to think about, well, what's the thing that's holding me back? If you're 5 miles into the ride and huffing and puffing, and everyone else looks super calm and relaxed, that means you're just plain not fit enough. It can be that you just don't have enough high end. Like, you need to deal with surges better. It's not your strength to respond to surges. Well, you're going to have to practice that. You may have to do trainer sessions where, in a fatigue state, you practice going really hard and then repeating that over and over. So this also gets to so I've talked about the easy stuff to do, more time going easy. The other part is going really hard and really taxing yourself, like really hurting yourself. Some people just never do that, or they just do it once in a while, or the only time it happens is when they're getting dropped on a ride once a week. Or they might just even throw up their hands and say, I'm not going to even try. This is the place I'm going to get dropped. Just throw up my hands here and that's it. Now, ideally, if you're in that situation, you're holding on, by the skin of your teeth. You're going as hard as you can to stay on for as long as you can. Oftentimes, the thing that is holding us back from staying on longer is mental, and not that not that you're going to go from getting dropped 5 miles into the ride to staying on for 30 miles because of positive thinking, but you can potentially do more than you think. You've really got to do the high-end work. How much are you willing to suffer to put yourself into a place of hurt? It's not permanent. It's not forever. But if you never do it, you're never stressing your body enough to get faster and better. Of course, there's a lot of ways to put yourself in the hurt zone. So here's one problem that happens on group rides that prevents you from getting faster. You're worried about getting dropped. So you never actually go all the way to your limit. If I go all the way to my limit on the front of a group ride like this, and there are guys right on my wheel, and I'm just, let's say I'm pushing 450 watts, and I can do that for X amount of time. If I get to the end of that X amount of time, the limit of what I can do, I will be cooked. I will get dropped. So what usually happens in that kind of situation is my watts start to fall a little bit, and then boop, everyone comes around me. And if I'm lucky, I get to pull into the line and recover and rest. But what that means is, if I was able to pull into the line and recover and rest, I didn't actually get to the point where I couldn't put out more power. I can still put out power. I didn't fully tax myself. So, how am I going to fully tax myself if I don't want to get dropped? I can't. Boom. That's the problem with group rides. You often do not get the full measure of stress that you would if you were going solo or if you were doing a workout on a trainer. Now think about it. In your area, if you live in a big enough area that there are Cat 1s and Cat 2s or pro riders, how often do you see them on your group rides? Probably, like me as a Cat 3. How often am I doing a ride where there are Cat 1s on the ride? Pretty rarely. There are essentially, on the pop ride, for us to have a Cat 1 is like once a year experience, maybe. Like a Cat 1 shows up one time during the whole year. We did have a spate of time where a Cat 1 regularly came on our ride, and we still talk about it because he blew us up. I mean, he didn't drop us all, although I assume he could if he wanted to, but he would get on the front and just drill it. And this was during the winter. It was dark. I guess this was, in his mind, good prep for his race season. I don't know exactly why he joined us, because most of the guys at his level do not do that. And boy, he really, like when you saw him pull up on the ride, you knew you were in for a fright fest. Like you were gonna suffer really bad on the ride. And you could hear people groan when he showed up. Those guys don't do these rides because they're not ideal for getting faster. They have different goals. Their goal is not to just have fun on the bike. Their goal is to get faster for this race, this A race, at some point or whatever, whatever their goal is. Their goal is not to win the town city limit sprint on a group ride every Tuesday and Thursday. That's not their goal. So, um, think about that. You may have to make sacrifices to what you normally do to get faster. And for example, a lot of people that I know, including myself, do a lot more trainer work in the off season, like in the winter when it's harder to ride outside, and there's no races going on. And sometimes we end up being the very fastest and fittest right when winter ends. And then we just get progressively slower as the year goes, as we're riding outside in these group rides all the time. That's a pretty common scenario. So you may have to do specific kinds of interval workouts, sacrifice what you love, which is the group ride and the social experience, from time to time to get better. So that might mean, for example, having 1 or 2 sessions per week where you do some kind of interval workout. And you've got to make that sacrifice. Now, these kinds of adaptations do accumulate over time. In other words, you can have fitness that carries over year to year, such that year 1 versus year 2, you get benefit from that year 1 work into year 2, and then into year 3 and into year 4, so that you're maybe putting in the same amount of time, but you're just getting a little bit stronger and faster. Now let's also talk about another issue. So if you're doing group rides and you're a B rider, and you're at the place where the A guys gather and the B guys gather, there's a difference. There's a visual difference between the B riders and the A riders. You could just look at the two groups and be able to say which one's the A group and the B group. And I'm not talking about the aero carbon wheels or the expense of the bike, or what their kits are or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what their bodies look like. The bodies of faster riders just look different, and they are leaner and meaner. They look like a coiled spring. They have core strength. They just look like sinew. There's just this power that you can see in their bodies that is sort of like that thin old man strength, at least for masters riders, maybe not for the young guys. They just look different. And if you don't look like that, if you look like a chubby guy, well, you're at a disadvantage. It means your body hasn't changed. You haven't worked on changing your body. And if you haven't changed on working your body, that must mean you don't really care about changing your body. Because if you cared about changing about your body, it would change. Now, you're saying, well, I care, but I don't know how to do it. Well, there's a million ways to do that too. But fundamentally, you're going to have to eat better. You're going to have to lose some weight. You're going to have to work on things like your core strength. And you're going to have to work harder. When you go from 1,000 miles of bike riding per year to 8,000 miles per year, and not just farting around, going at half speed 8,000 miles, but really working hard and doing some good stuff, your body's going to change all by itself to a certain degree. So you've got to work on your body and changing your body. You will start, as you become an A rider, you will start to look like an A rider because your body will change. We can talk about a million other things like bike fit and stuff like that, and maybe a few simple equipment changes and other crap, but I think those are the fundamentals, and you just have to want it. If you don't have something in your life that's achievable, it must be because you don't really want it, and that's okay. It's okay to be a B-level rider. It's enjoyable to be a B-level rider. I've done hundreds of B rides. It's fun, being in a smooth pace line, for example, on Pop B. It's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed my time on the Pop B ride. There's nothing wrong with just saying this is the amount of time and work I want to do. This is the experience I want to have. That is fine. It is, and it's a good time. It is fitness. It is work. It is beautiful in its own way. But if you're the guy that wants to go from B to A, you're going to have to change the things you do if you have failed so far. You know, for example, our team, we would surely like to recruit people to our team every single year. And you're kind of looking for the up and comers that are progressing and, like getting better and having more experience, getting faster. For example, me going from, oh, I didn't know there's a bike ride near my house to, yeah, I'm going to start riding my bike again. And then eventually doing the Pop B ride, and then taking a flyer and trying my luck on the Pop A and freaking out and like, wow, this amoeba peloton of everyone being really close to each other and going fast freaked me out. But the second time it was easier, and etc. Well, eventually, I ended up racing and being on a team. And so we're looking out for those kinds of people that are getting better, that show talent. And you don't have to be a great talent, but you do need to be a good person willing to work hard and improve. Um, and I kind of wonder sometimes why some people that seem to want to improve aren't improving, and why we don't have more people that fit that mold of, like, we saw them last year on Pop B or B level rides, and now they're doing A level rides. There should be like 10 of those people on the pop scene per year, but it doesn't seem like there is. And of course, we could talk about reasons for that, and part of it is the declining popularity of road biking, I'm sure. Where are all the young people? We're just old farts on these rides. Where are the 20-year-olds? Where are the early 30s guys? There's just not that many of those guys, and I think the numbers are dropping off, and they will continue to drop off because young people don't ride bikes. From what I can tell, young people don't ride bikes that much, and um, I'm a little bit pessimistic about the future of cycling for that reason. It's just, who's the next generation? I think, at least here in the Dallas scene, we see that where you have the sort of the Lance Armstrong generation, that age, and then it seems like there's a drop off, and part of it is cycling takes a lot of time, and when you're younger, you may be working on your career, schooling, just don't have the time for it. And then as you get older, you're like, well, I have the time, I have a little bit of money that I can invest in something that makes me fitter and feel better. I get that. That's me. That was me. I bought my first road bike in 2002 and did that till 2007-ish. But it was very recreational. Didn't put a lot of time into it. In my mind, I thought it was a lot of time, but really looking back, it was not very much time. Riding 1,000 miles per year, 1,500 miles per year, something like that, and not riding at all in the winter. Spending 15 minutes on the trainer twice a week in the winter, stuff like that. Um, and then I put the bike away for several years, about 7 years. I didn't really touch my bike. Was it really that long? 7 years? Yeah, I think it was a long time. So got back into it, and just when I got back into it, I got into it at a higher level. I mean, I don't mean higher level. I mean with more intensity, with more desire to improve and see where I could take my fitness. So the point of this speech is to encourage people to take that next step. And like I said, there's a million ways to do it. There's not just one way to do it. But it feels good to improve. I think that's one of the great things about cycling, is that improvement is easy to measure, is easy to see, and there are many things in life that we do that improvement is very difficult to measure, or we may feel like we're on the hamster wheel in life, doing the same things over and over, whether it's work life or whatever. But cycling can give us a sense of improving and working on something. Even if you're older and you feel like you're declining, there's something you can work on, something that you can improve at, and have fun doing it. So that's all I got for today. But I thought I wanted to share those thoughts, kind of an answer to my father. Yes, you could have been an A rider. He's old now, like that category of, I said, where maybe you're too old to become an A rider, but he can be, for him, I think the goal would be he can become a B rider now, get back to being a B rider in his relatively older age, and that would be a great goal, a wonderful goal for him, and I think he can do it, and you can do it too. So if you want to, and it's okay if you don't want to, it's okay. I will not hold you in less regard. I realize that everyone has different goals, aspirations, and are doing this for different kinds of reasons. But I can tell you, I'm glad that I've made improvement, and it's been a lot of fun for me. I feel like I'm riding a wave. Like I'm on this surfboard. I've never surfed, but I'm riding a wave, and I don't want to get off the board. I just want to keep going. It feels good. I just want to keep going. It's not work that's, going to pay off with like a first place or this or that, even if you do get results in races or something. It's work that pays off, that makes you feel good, that just, that's the only way I can put it. It makes you feel good. It makes me feel good. That's why I do it. Anyway, I'll cut out now and leave you to the ride if you want to watch it, if you've been watching it all. Sorry I haven't commented on the ride, but it was a hot day, although in looking at this sunset, it's pretty. It's really pretty. And, that's part of living this life of cycling. All right. Check you guys later. sometimes he does.
No, yeah,
But you're like,
right.
oh, that's not really dangerous. And nobody marks it, and
He
suddenly,
knows his power.
yeah. You can try that over and over. Like there's some days that water drive's kind of a lot weaker than what it was on Saturday. And that was one of the fastest. That was one of the strongest fields. That's my strongest water field I've ever been in. Right, yeah. You know, me and Glenn made it to the end. And, but everyone else is like above our level.